I never thought silence could be so loud. The church was filled with flowers and murmurs, but all I could hear was the echo of my grandmother's voice in my head. Warm, steady, and gone. People I barely recognized kept touching my arm, whispering how sorry they were. They didn't know her like I did. To most, she was just an old woman who baked too much and wore pearls even to water the garden. But to me, she was the only person who ever made me feel seen. Tiffany stood near the casket, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, though her mascara hadn't moved an inch. Her grief looked rehearsed, perfect, like everything about her life. I caught her glancing at the lawyer's briefcase in the corner, not at the flowers or the photos, but at that leather case holding Grandma's final words. That's when the unease began to stir in me. I remembered the afternoons in Grandma's condo, the scent of vanilla candles, the tick of the old clock, and her gentle laughter as she made tea just for me. That condo wasn't just a property. It was my childhood stitched into walls and windows. Tiffany rarely visited. She always said she was too busy, or allergic to dust. Now, watching her eye that briefcase like a hawk, I wondered if she finally realized its value. People drifted out of the pews after the service. I stayed behind, tracing the edge of Grandma's photo frame, whispering thank you under my breath. Tiffany appeared beside me, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She lived a long life, she said, her tone clipped, efficient. It's time to move forward, move forward. She said it like grief was a task to cross off. I forced a smile, but inside something cracked. Tiffany had always been the orchestrator, the one who decided where family gatherings happened, what we wore, who sat where. Even at Grandma's funeral, she was directing the emotional traffic. Outside, the wind caught the edges of the burial pamphlets. I watched one swirl away into the parking lot. Tiffany was already speaking to our uncle about next steps, about handling things quickly. She said it all in that cool, managerial tone that made everyone nod in agreement. I knew what she meant: the estate, the will, the condo. As we stood by the gravesite, I couldn't stop thinking about how Grandma used to hold my hand and say, "Don't let the world harden you, sweetheart. Softness is strength." Tiffany would roll her eyes whenever she heard that. To her, softness was weakness. I felt the distance between us widen like the grave in front of me. When the final prayer ended, I placed a single white rose on the coffin. Tiffany dropped a bouquet of lilies, dramatically arranged, the kind she probably ordered online that morning. Then she turned to me with that perfectly measured smile. "We should talk soon. There's a lot to organize," she said. I nodded, even though my chest tightened. I didn't want to talk about organizing anything. I wanted to hold on to every memory, every scent, every moment that made Grandma's home feel like mine. As we walked toward the cars, Tiffany's voice floated behind me. "I'll call the lawyer tomorrow." My heart stumbled at those words. It was too soon, too cold, too calculated. I looked back once more at the flowers on the casket and whispered, "I'll protect what's yours, Grandma." The sky was dimming as I drove home. The city lights flickered to life, but everything felt muted. I thought about the condo by the sea, the one place where I still felt close to her. I made up my mind that I'd visit soon, just to sit in her chair, breathe her air, and feel safe again. What I didn't know was that Tiffany had already started her own kind of visit, the kind that comes with documents, signatures, and quiet deceit. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and polished wood, that kind of sterile scent that makes grief feel like business. Tiffany walked in ahead of me, her heels tapping against the tile with a rhythm that said in control, as always. I followed quietly, still carrying the little velvet pouch that held Grandma's rosary. It was silly, maybe, but it made me feel like she was sitting beside me. Mr. Stein, Grandma's lawyer, looked up from a thick envelope and smiled politely. "Thank you both for coming," he said, gesturing for us to sit. Tiffany crossed her legs with the kind of confidence that comes from assuming the world belongs to you. I noticed she'd worn a designer suit, soft gray, expensive, power-stitched into every seam. I was in a plain black dress I'd worn to the funeral. He began reading in a calm, deliberate voice. First came a few small bequests, donations to her church, jewelry to distant cousins. Tiffany smiled at each one, patient, certain that the real gift, the condo, was still to come. She leaned forward slightly when he reached the last page, and I could almost feel her anticipation radiate beside me. Then Mr. Stein said the words that split the air. To my granddaughter, the one who never forgot me, I leave my condo by the sea. There was a pause so long you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. Tiffany's hand froze mid-adjustment of her hair. She turned toward me, her lips parting as if to correct him, but no sound came out. I whispered, "Me?" And he nodded. "Yes, your grandmother specified the property be transferred solely to you." The silence stretched until Tiffany forced a smile, that kind people wear when they've just swallowed something bitter. "Of course," she said smoothly, though her voice cracked faintly. "Grandma was always sentimental. She said it like it was a weakness." Mr. Stein slid a copy of the will across the desk toward me. I hesitated before taking it, almost afraid to touch it. The condo wasn't just a building. It was the last piece of her love, the place where we'd shared our quiet afternoons. I didn't think of its value, just the scent of jasmine candles, the creak of the balcony door, her soft laugh. Tiffany leaned back, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. "Well," she said, with that falsely cheerful tone she used when suppressing rage, "I'm happy for you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. They glimmered, hard and calculating. I mumbled something about how Grandma must have had her reasons, but inside, guilt began to crawl up my chest. Tiffany had always been the one who managed things, the responsible one, the one everyone praised. I'd been the dreamer, the sentimental one Grandma defended when others called me naive. I could already feel the tension building, the invisible line drawn between us, old and new. As we walked out, Tiffany placed a manicured hand on my shoulder. "You deserve it," she said sweetly. "Grandma loved you." Her thumb pressed just a little too hard, like a reminder. "But you'll need help handling all that paperwork. Let me take care of it for you." I wanted to believe her. I really did. Grief makes you crave connection, even from the people who've hurt you before. I nodded weakly, thanking her. Outside, sunlight poured through the tall windows, bright and harsh. Tiffany turned to talk to one of Grandma's old friends, her laughter sharp and hollow. I watched her reflection in the glass. The quick flicker of irritation that flashed across her face when she thought no one was looking. I told myself it was just jealousy, that it would pass. But as I clutched the will to my chest, a strange chill crept through me. I had no idea that this guilt, this need to believe my sister still cared, would become the very weapon she'd use to take everything away. After the will reading, Tiffany transformed almost overnight. She started showing up at my apartment with takeout and wine, smiling like we were kids again. It was disarming. For the first time in years, she called me sis, without sarcasm. "We should spend more time together," she said one evening, setting a bag of Thai food on my counter. Grandma would want that. I wanted to believe her. The condo paperwork had already started piling up. Letters from the estate office, transfer documents, tax notices I didn't understand. So when Tiffany offered to help with the boring stuff, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "You're always so good at this," I said. She smiled modestly. "I just want to make sure no one takes advantage of you." Her tone was syrupy sweet, almost too smooth. But guilt made me ignore the oddness in her voice. I kept reminding myself how cruel it would be to push her away after she was trying so hard. Over the next few weeks, Tiffany became a fixture in my life. She'd stop by after work, armed with coffee and a laptop, telling me she was organizing everything. I noticed she was always in a hurry when it came to signing things. "Just initial here," she'd say, flipping pages quickly. "Standard transfer verifications." I'd glance at the lines, legal jargon that might as well have been another language, and sign wherever she pointed. She always said she'd file them with the estate lawyer. Sometimes she'd sigh theatrically, mentioning how stressed she was with everything falling on her shoulders. Then she'd squeeze my hand and add, "But I don't mind." I promised Grandma I'd look after you. It sounded loving. It felt suffocating. One night, as we sat on my couch surrounded by papers, her phone buzzed. She flipped it face down without even glancing. "Work," she muttered quickly, forcing a smile. I didn't press, but it happened again the next day. And again after that, always face down, always a quick glance of something she didn't want me to see. Still, I told myself not to be paranoid. I wanted my sister back. I wanted to believe that maybe Grandma's death had softened her. Tiffany began reminiscing about childhood memories, how we used to play pretend in Grandma's living room, how I'd follow her around like a shadow. She laughed softly, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve. "You always looked up to me," she said, her voice light but her eyes sharp. "You still do, I think." I laughed too, though the words sat wrong in my chest. A week later, she asked for copies of the condo's title deed. "Just for safekeeping," she explained. "You never know what might get lost." She smiled, tilting her head the way she used to when she wanted something. I hesitated only a moment before handing them over. "Don't worry," she said, tucking the papers neatly into a folder. "I'll keep everything secure." I noticed she'd switched perfumes. Something floral but heavy, the kind that lingered long after she left. Maybe that's why the next time I entered my living room, it still smelled like her. Sweet, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. She started using phrases like "we" instead of "you." "We" should handle the condo insurance. "We should meet the property assessor. We should make decisions together." It sounded inclusive, but each time she said it, I felt something quietly slipping out of my hands. One afternoon, she hugged me goodbye and whispered, "You can trust me." I smiled and said I knew, but when I closed the door behind her, my heart gave a small, strange flutter. The kind that comes when you realize you're standing in a story you don't yet understand. If I had looked closer, maybe I'd have noticed the cracks beneath her kindness, the calls she took in another room, the way she always redirected the mail to her address for efficiency. But I didn't. I was too busy believing this new version of my sister was real. And that belief was the first mistake that cost me everything. It was a gray morning when everything began to unravel. The kind of morning that hums with unease even before anything happens. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing across the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hi, is this Ms. Cooper?" a man's voice asked. "This is Martin, the building manager at the Seaview condominiums." "Just confirming. Are you okay with the movers clearing out the rest of your furniture today?" My stomach dropped. "What movers?" There was a pause. "The buyer's moving crew. They said the property transfer went through last week." For a second, everything in me went still. "That's impossible," I said. "That condo isn't for sale." He sounded genuinely confused. "Ma'am, we have signed ownership documents filed through the county office. Tiffany Adams, she's listed as the seller." My voice caught in my throat. "Tiffany," I don't even remember hanging up. One moment I was standing in my kitchen, the next I was grabbing my car keys and running out the door. The drive to the condo blurred past in a haze of disbelief. The streets, the lights, the world itself, all background noise to the single looping thought. She couldn't have done this. Not her. When I pulled up to the building, I saw a moving truck backed up to the front entrance. Strangers were carrying out boxes. My boxes. Grandma's china set, the one wrapped in faded newspaper, the old rocking chair she used to sit in, now shoved carelessly into the back of a truck. "Excuse me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "What are you doing?" A man in a blue uniform looked up, confused. "We're with Coastal Movers." The owner said everything had to be cleared today. "I'm the owner," I snapped, breathless. "This is my grandmother's condo." He frowned, pulling out a clipboard. "Not according to the papers, ma'am." He turned it around, and there it was, my sister's name in clean, confident handwriting, under the seller's signature. For a moment, it felt like the ground tilted beneath me. My hands trembled as I reached into my purse for my keys, desperate for proof that this was still mine. But when I fit the key into the door, it didn't turn. It didn't even fit. She'd changed the locks. The realization hit like a physical blow. My breath came in short bursts as I stepped back, staring at the door, the same door where Grandma used to wait for me, smiling, her hand resting on the frame. Now it was closed, silent, foreign. I called Tiffany. Once, twice, 5 times. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Tiffany. Leave a message and I'll..." Click. I tried again, my fingers shaking. The same thing. I sent a text, then another. "Tiff, please call me. There's a mistake. Please." No reply. The movers kept working, their voices muffled against the roar in my ears. I felt invisible, like a ghost watching her own life being dismantled. One of them handed me a box that had been set aside, maybe out of pity. Inside were a few photos. Me and Grandma on the beach, her arm around me, her smile soft and certain. My throat tightened until it hurt. I sank down on the curb, clutching that box, staring as the truck door slammed shut. The engine rumbled to life. And just like that, everything that tied me to Grandma was gone. When the truck turned the corner, the silence it left behind was deafening. I sat there for a long time, until the sun dipped low and the building lights flickered on. I kept thinking there had to be some logical explanation. A mix-up, a forgery, a misunderstanding. Tiffany wouldn't do this. She couldn't. We just spent weeks together, laughing, reconnecting. She'd called me sis, but deep down I knew. Every overly sweet smile, every document she rushed me to sign, every "don't worry, I'll handle it." They all replayed in my head like flashing warning lights I'd ignored. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My phone lit up once with a message notification, and my heart leapt until I saw the sender. Not Tiffany, the realtor. It was a generic text. "Congratulations on the completed property transfer. Funds have been deposited." Funds? My stomach turned. The condo wasn't just gone, she'd sold it. Cashed it out. Betrayed me completely. I sat in my driveway for hours, staring at that message, rereading it until the screen dimmed. The tears didn't come, not yet. Just this heavy, hollow ache. When they finally did, they came in waves. Not just for the condo, but for Grandma, for my own blindness, for the version of my sister I'd tried so hard to believe still existed. That night, I slept maybe an hour. When I woke, the first thing I did was check my phone again. Still nothing from Tiffany, only silence. The kind that tells you the person who hurt you isn't sorry. They're just gone. But I wasn't. Not yet. And somewhere beneath the grief, something sharp began to form. A thought, faint but growing. If Tiffany could take everything from me so easily, she'd made one mistake. She assumed I'd just let her. Sleep became a stranger after that day. I spent nights pacing the living room, replaying every moment, every smile, every word Tiffany had said. The betrayal didn't feel real. It pulsed like a wound that refused to close. I kept telling myself I'd wake up and find it undone, that this was some twisted misunderstanding. But every sunrise only confirmed the truth. One evening, unable to bear the silence, I went to the attic where Grandma's boxes were stored. Dust floated like ghosts in the beam of my flashlight. These were the pieces of a life I'd clung to. The smell of lavender sachets, old photo albums, brittle letters she'd written years ago. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just comfort. Proof that something good had once been mine. But then I found it. A thick envelope tucked inside a cookbook, sealed with a strip of brittle tape. My name was written on it in Grandma's looping cursive. My breath caught. I sat down on the floor, hands trembling, and opened it. Inside were several documents. Her will, copies of bank statements, and a short handwritten note. "Keep these safe, sweetheart. You never know what life may bring." Her words felt like they'd traveled through time to find me. I scanned the will, my eyes moving over the familiar lines I remembered from the lawyer's office. But something else caught my attention, a paragraph I didn't recall seeing before. It was a clause near the bottom, nestled between dense legal language. The property located at Seaview Condominiums shall not be transferred. Mortgaged or sold within one year of my passing without the written consent of the sole beneficiary. I blinked, reading it again, slower this time, without the written consent of the sole beneficiary. That beneficiary was me. For a long moment, I just stared at the words, letting them sink in. My heart began to race, each beat sharper than the last. I reached for my phone, opened the scanned copy Tiffany had helped me upload weeks ago. I zoomed in on the digital version of the will, and the clause wasn't there. It had been removed. She hadn't just tricked me. She'd tampered with Grandma's will. My pulse roared in my ears. I flipped through the rest of the documents, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The notarized signature was dated and stamped properly. Everything legitimate. Grandma had even initialed beside that clause. There was no mistake. That meant Tiffany's sale wasn't just betrayal. It was illegal. I sank back against the wall, staring at the paper in my lap. I could almost hear Grandma's voice again, calm and wise. People show who they are when money whispers, darling. That's when you listen hardest. I thought of Tiffany's soft apologies, her fake concern, the way she'd kept saying, "Let me handle it, sis." I'd been so eager to trust her, to rebuild something that had always been fragile between us, and she'd used that weakness like a weapon. I felt a strange mix of fury and relief flooding through me. Fury that she'd done this. Relief that I finally had proof. Concrete, irrefutable proof. I picked up the will again and read the line one more time, this time out loud. My voice trembled, but the words steadied me as they left my mouth. Without the written consent of the sole beneficiary, I was the sole beneficiary, and I had never given consent. A chill ran through me. Tiffany hadn't just broken my trust. She'd broken the law. The next morning, I woke with a strange steadiness in my chest, the kind that comes when pain has burned itself into something colder, sharper. I'd spent the night reading Grandma's will over and over until the words blurred. Now I needed answers, real ones. Mr. Stein's office sat downtown, tucked inside an old sandstone building that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. He'd been Grandma's lawyer for nearly 30 years, a kind-eyed man with silver hair and the patience of someone who'd seen too many family feuds play out in polished conference rooms. When I walked in, he looked up from his desk and immediately frowned. "You look pale, my dear. Sit down. What's happened?" I didn't waste time. I laid the original will on his desk and slid it toward him. "I found this in Grandma's belongings. It's different from the one Tiffany submitted. There's a clause, one she erased." He adjusted his glasses, reading slowly. I watched his expression tighten as he reached the paragraph I'd memorized by heart. "I see," he murmured. Then he leaned back in his chair. "That clause is enforceable. Very enforceable. So, what does that mean?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. He folded his hands. "It means the property was not legally transferable. Any sale made within a year, without your explicit written consent, is voidable under probate law." The room felt suddenly too bright. "You're saying the sale can be undone?" "In principle, yes," he said carefully. "But there's more. You mentioned Tiffany helped you with paperwork?" I nodded. "She said she'd handle the signatures, that it was just routine stuff for title clearance." Mr. Stein sighed deeply. "Then I suspect she forged your consent." The buyer, the bank, and the notary likely all acted on false documents. I stared at him, the words hitting harder than I expected. She forged my name?" He gave a slow, regretful nod. "If that's true, she committed fraud. Real estate fraud at that, a felony." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. A part of me wanted to storm out, drive straight to her house and scream the truth in her face. But another part, the quieter, wiser one, held me back. I could almost hear Grandma's voice again, soft but firm. "Don't swing wild, darling." "Aim steady. What do I do now?" I asked. Mr. Stein tapped the desk gently. "You don't confront her, not yet. Let her think she's safe. People like Tiffany always make mistakes when they believe they've won. That's when we act." I let out a shaky breath. "So I just wait?" He smiled faintly. "You observe. Gather everything you can. Text messages, emails, anything she said about the sale. If there's evidence she forged your signature or profited unlawfully, we'll have grounds to void the transaction and press charges." I nodded slowly. The thought of Tiffany sitting somewhere, smug and untouched, burned through me. But beneath that fire was something else. purpose. "I'll get you everything," I said quietly. As I stood to leave, Mr. Stein added, "One more thing. Your grandmother was very fond of you. She told me once, 'My granddaughter's heart is too good for this world. But her mind, that's her armor. Use both.'" Those words followed me out of the office like a whisper of strength. The sky outside was a flat, steely blue, the kind that hinted at storms brewing. But for the first time in weeks, I felt grounded. That evening, I opened my laptop and began combing through every message Tiffany had sent me. Each, "Don't worry, I've got it handled." Every, "Just sign, and I'll take care of the rest." It all looked different now. Sinister in hindsight. I printed the conversations, labeled the files, even checked the digital metadata on the scanned will she'd sent me. Tiny discrepancies, timestamps that didn't match, document edits done at odd hours, began to piece together like a puzzle. It wasn't just about the condo anymore. It was about justice, about Grandma's name and my own dignity. By midnight, I had a neat folder sitting on my desk labeled Evidence. I stared at it for a long time before sliding it into the drawer. The old me, the one who trusted blindly, who mistook kindness for loyalty, would have acted in anger. But not this time. This time, I'd do what Grandma taught me. I'd wait, watch, and when the time came, I'd strike clean. She thought I was still the quiet sister. She didn't know I was building her downfall. It started with a text I could barely bring myself to send. "Coffee this week? I miss you." My fingers hovered over the screen before hitting send. It felt fake, manipulative, but so had everything she'd done. Within minutes, Tiffany replied with a heart emoji and a cheerful, "Finally, I was beginning to think you hated me." I stared at that message for a long time, letting the irony sink in. We met at a cafe downtown, one of those places with glass walls and overpriced lattes. Tiffany arrived in a designer coat I'd never seen before, gold hoops glinting in the sunlight. Her smile was effortless, rehearsed. "You look great," she said, air kissing my cheek. "How have you been holding up?" I smiled back. Better. Trying to move on. She visibly relaxed, leaning back in her chair like a cat settling into warmth. "Good," she purred. "That's healthy. Grandma would want us both to move forward." I almost laughed. If Grandma could see her now. As she talked, I kept my phone angled slightly toward her, the voice recorder app running quietly beneath the table. My pulse beat in rhythm with the soft red light on the screen. Every sentence she spoke was a thread, and I was collecting them, one by one. She launched into stories about her new opportunities. The condo's sale had freed her up, she said, twirling her spoon in her cup. "You wouldn't believe how fast the market moves when you know the right people. I made a few renovations before closing, tripled the value." I nodded, sipping slowly to hide my shaking hands. "That's impressive," I said. "You always were the smart one with business." Her eyes glittered, hungry for praise. "It's about taking chances, you know? Grandma would have been proud." "Proud," I repeated softly, pretending to agree while pressing my thumb discreetly on the phone screen, confirming the recording was still going. She laughed, talking about a buyer friend who had helped speed up the process. Each boast was a breadcrumb. Each brag another line of evidence she didn't realize she was feeding me. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Honestly, you dodged a bullet, sis. The taxes alone would have crushed you. Selling was for the best. Trust me." I tilted my head, meeting her gaze. "You're probably right," I said gently. "I never could have handled it alone." That sentence seemed to please her more than anything. She smiled, wide and victorious, sipping her latte like a queen savoring her crown. Inside, I was trembling, but not from fear anymore. From control. After coffee, she insisted on showing me her new car, a sleek silver Audi that still smelled of leather. "Business has been good," she said proudly. "You have to treat yourself, right?" I smiled again, the kind of smile that hides an army behind it. "You deserve it." That night, I sat at my desk and replayed the conversation. Hearing her voice through the recording sent chills down my spine. So casual, so certain, so unaware that every word would come back to haunt her. I transcribed everything, labeling timestamps where she'd slipped up. I made a few renovations before closing. I sold it fast. It's about taking chances. She didn't realize she'd admitted to being the one who handled the transaction. Not the realtor, not a lawyer, her, and I wasn't done. Over the next week, I invited her to brunch, a movie night, even a quick shopping trip. Each time I acted lighter, friendlier. Each time she dropped another hint, another careless truth. She'd grown bold in my silence, mistaking it for surrender. But every lie she told me was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. When she laughed about how easy it was to sign things online these days, I smiled. When she said, "I know you'd have never sold it that fast," I nodded. When she bragged that Grandma's legacy finally paid off, I pretended not to hear the venom under the sweetness. And when I got home, I archived it all, voice notes, receipts, screenshots, evidence. For years, Tiffany had played the role of the perfect daughter, the golden sister. I used to think that meant she'd always win. But sitting there, surrounded by proof of her deceit, I realized something Grandma had always tried to teach me. The truth doesn't need to shout. It waits, and mine was waiting, patient, quiet, and ready. By the time I returned to Mr. Stein's office, I wasn't the same woman who had walked in broken a week ago. My grief hadn't vanished, but it had hardened into something steadier. Purpose had a way of cooling anger until it became precision. I handed him a flash drive filled with recordings, screenshots, and the digital paper trail Tiffany had so carelessly left behind. He listened as I spoke, quietly clicking through the files. Every time her voice played through my phone, bragging about renovations, closing, knowing the right people, his eyebrows lifted a little higher. When the audio ended, he gave a slow nod. "This is good," he said. "Very good. Now let's connect the dots." We spent the afternoon tracing everything. Tiffany's forged consent form had been notarized by someone in a different city. A notary who, after one quick call, admitted she'd never met me in person. "Your sister said you were bedridden," the woman confessed. "She signed for you while I witnessed via video." My stomach twisted. Tiffany had thought of everything, or almost everything. Mr. Stein opened the property file next. "Here's the digital deed transfer," he said, pointing to an electronic signature that looked eerily like mine. But when he magnified it, the truth showed itself in small imperfections. The curve of the Y in my name was off. The C didn't match my usual slant. She'd copied my signature, but not perfectly. "She forged this," he said quietly, and left just enough evidence to prove it. I watched the cursor blink on the screen, each pulse echoing the beat of my heart. It was strange how clarity could be both devastating and satisfying. For every lie uncovered, a piece of me came back. We printed records, notarized copies, verified timestamps. Each new detail painted the same picture. Tiffany hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd orchestrated a legal fraud, fake consent forms, altered will documents, false email authorizations. She'd built her deceit with the precision of someone who thought she'd never be caught. As I signed each affidavit, my hands didn't shake anymore. Mr. Stein noticed. "You're calmer," he said. "I have to be," I replied. "She wants me to fall apart. I'm not giving her that satisfaction." He smiled faintly. "Good, because from this point on, we're not cleaning up a mess. We're building a case." The phrase sent a thrill through me. Building a case. For the first time since the condo disappeared, I felt control slide back into my hands. I wasn't just surviving Tiffany's betrayal anymore. I was preparing to end it. When I got home, I laid everything out on my dining table. Paperwork, screenshots, notes from Mr. Stein. The evidence looked small, just pages and ink, but it carried the weight of truth. I thought of Grandma again, her voice patient and amused. "You have more of me in you than you realize." I smiled at that memory. Maybe she was right. Days passed as we gathered more proof. Mr. Stein contacted the buyer's attorney, who admitted their client had been convinced the sale was family approved. The wire transfer led straight to Tiffany's account. Every breadcrumb tightened the web she'd spun, and every strand was beginning to pull against her. But even as the pieces fell into place, heartbreak lingered. Late one night, I opened old photos of us, two little girls on the beach holding Grandma's hand. We'd shared the same laughter, the same home, the same love. Now she was just a stranger who wore my trust like a mask. Still, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't that naive girl anymore, the one who handed over documents with trembling faith. I was learning to think like her, to anticipate her moves, to be patient where she'd be reckless. When Mr. Stein called again the next morning, I was ready for whatever came next. But I wasn't ready for what he said. I traced the proceeds from the condo's sale, he told me. The money hit Tiffany's account 2 weeks ago. I gripped the phone tighter. And? She spent most of it, my breath caught. On what? He paused, almost reluctant to answer. Luxury items, a new Audi, high-end jewelry, and multiple designer purchases. There's barely anything left. For a moment, all I could do was stare at the wall, the words echoing through me. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was what it meant. She hadn't even paused to mourn Grandma's memory, hadn't even hesitated before turning love into currency. The betrayal was complete. But so was my resolve. I hung up the phone slowly, my pulse steady. The web she'd woven was starting to tighten, and she didn't even realize I was the one pulling the threads. Grandma's birthday was approaching, and for the first time since she passed, I decided to host a dinner in her memory. It wasn't sentimentality that guided me this time. It was strategy. The invitation list was short and deliberate. My parents, Tiffany, and one old family friend who happened to be Mr. Stein, dressed for the evening as simply Michael. He agreed without hesitation, his eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction. I spent the day setting the table exactly the way Grandma used to. Her old china, her lace tablecloth, the candles that smelled faintly of sandalwood. Every detail was a whisper of her presence, a reminder of the woman who'd taught me grace even in war. But beneath the nostalgia, there was something else, a current of anticipation, electric and sharp. Tonight, Tiffany would show her true self. When she arrived, she made an entrance that could have belonged in a magazine spread. A diamond pendant caught the light as she stepped in, her heels clicking confidently against the floor. "Wow," she said, pretending surprise. "You really went all out. Grandma would have loved this." Her tone was syrupy, too polished. She hugged me with one arm, the other clutching a designer purse that probably cost more than my rent. My parents looked relieved, happy to see their daughters getting along. I smiled back, matching her tone perfectly. She would have loved seeing us together. Dinner began smoothly. Small talk, laughter, old stories. It almost felt genuine. Almost. But under the warmth was tension so thick it hummed in the air. Every glance Tiffany threw my way was performative, every laugh a little too loud. She was in control. Or so she thought. When dessert was served, I made my move. "You know," I said lightly, pouring her a glass of wine, "I've been thinking about Grandma's condo a lot lately. It must have been hard handling all that paperwork on your own." She blinked, her fork pausing midair. Then she smiled, that polished, patronizing smile. "Oh, please. It was nothing. You were so overwhelmed at the time, I just took care of it. You're welcome, by the way." I forced a soft laugh, as if genuinely grateful. "You really did make it look easy. I still can't believe you sold it so quickly." Her ego flared. "Well, when you know people in real estate, doors open. It's all about confidence." She leaned back, swirling her wine, her pride practically dripping onto the tablecloth. That's when Michael spoke up for the first time. "Interesting," he said, smiling warmly. "Condos like that are rare. Out of curiosity, how did you manage the beneficiary consent? Most estates have tricky clauses." Tiffany glanced at him, slightly caught off guard. "Oh, it wasn't a big deal," she said. "The lawyer approved everything. My sister gave her consent. It was just paperwork, really." "Your sister?" He repeated, eyebrows raised. "That's odd. Most consent forms require in-person verification, not proxies." I could see her falter for the briefest second. Then she laughed too loudly. "Right, well, rules can be flexible when you know the right people." My parents looked between us, confused. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. Then I leaned forward. Tiffany, do you remember signing my name on that form? Or did you forget to mention that part? Her smile cracked, just a hairline fracture, but it was enough. What are you talking about? She snapped, her voice suddenly sharper. Mr. Stein's tone remained casual. We're just curious, he said smoothly. Forgery is such a risky move these days, especially when it involves a legal inheritance. Tiffany froze. I watched the realization ripple through her face. First disbelief, then anger, then panic trying to hide behind a smirk. Is this a joke? She said, laughing nervously. You're accusing me of something? In front of everyone? I met her eyes calmly. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said. I'm just confirming what the evidence already shows. The air thickened. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. My father leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. Tiffany, he said quietly, what is she talking about? She started to speak, but her voice wavered. This is ridiculous. She's trying to make me look bad. Mr. Stein reached into his jacket and set an envelope on the table. These are the documents your notary verified, he said gently. It's best you look at them. Her hand trembled as she opened it. Inside were copies of the forged signatures, time-stamped transfer emails, and the official complaint draft. The color drained from her face. For a long, suffocating moment, no one spoke. Even the candles seemed to flicker quieter. Finally, I broke the silence. You didn't just sell Grandma's condo, Tiffany. You sold the last piece of her that we had left, and you did it with my name. Tears welled in her eyes, but it wasn't guilt I saw. It was fear. You wouldn't dare press charges, she whispered. I leaned back, my voice steady. You'll find I'm a lot braver than you remember. She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse, muttering excuses, but the damage was done. The truth hung over the table like smoke that wouldn't clear. As she stormed out, I exhaled for the first time that night. My parents sat in stunned silence. Mr. Stein gave me a nod of quiet approval before saying, "That went better than expected." I wasn't so sure, because as the door closed behind Tiffany, I knew this wasn't over. It was only the beginning of her fall. For a brief, trembling moment after Tiffany stormed toward the door, I thought she might actually flee. But pride, her fatal flaw, wouldn't let her. She turned back, one manicured hand on the chair, her voice sharp with indignation. "You all think you're so clever," she spat. "You think you've trapped me, please." I did what any smart person would do. You're welcome, by the way, for selling that condo before it fell apart. My mother gasped softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tiffany, stop, please." But Tiffany was unraveling, and didn't even realize she was doing it out loud. "Grandma left that dump to her out of pity," she said, pointing at me. "And you know what? It's not even her signature that matters. Who reads those old wills anyway? I just used the consent form template from the lawyer's office. Easy." Anyone could have done it. The room froze. My father's face turned pale. My mother's trembling hand covered her mouth. I stayed completely still, heart pounding, though my expression didn't waver. I wanted her to finish, to hang herself with every arrogant word. Mr. Stein, Michael, calmly set down his wineglass, the sound of crystal against wood slicing through the silence. "That," he said quietly, "was a very interesting choice of words, Miss Tiffany." Her head whipped toward him. "Excuse me?" He straightened in his chair, his polite smile fading into something sharper, colder, the kind of composure only lawyers and predators shared. Because the person who used the consent form template without authorization committed a Class C felony in this state. Forgery, property fraud, and false representation of a beneficiary. Her face went white. What are you talking about?" He reached into his suit pocket and withdrew a sleek leather folder, placing it gently on the table. "You might remember me as Michael, the family friend." His tone was calm, deliberate. "My full name is Martin Stein, executor of your grandmother's estate, and legal counsel for the rightful beneficiary of her will." The color drained completely from her cheeks. She stumbled a step backward, looking to our parents for rescue. None came. I sat still, meeting her eyes, my voice steady and quiet. He's been working with me for weeks, Tiffany. Every word you just said, every single one, was recorded, including your little comment about who reads wills. Tiffany's lips parted in shock. Her gaze darted toward the small recorder sitting unnoticed near the centerpiece, its red light faintly blinking. Mr. Stein continued, flipping open the folder. Here's the original will, notarized, filed, and time-stamped. And here, he added, sliding another paper forward, is the clause your grandmother included. No transfer or sale of the condominium shall occur within 1 year of her passing, except with written and verified consent of the inheritor. He looked directly at Tiffany. That inheritor was your sister. The consent form you forged invalidates the sale, which means he snapped the folder shut. The condo still belongs to her. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air felt heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. My father finally spoke, his voice low and broken. Tiffany, please tell me this isn't true. But Tiffany's eyes were wide and unfocused, the defiance draining from her like sand through a sieve. I didn't mean it wasn't supposed to... Wasn't supposed to what? I asked quietly. Get caught? Her tears came fast, but they carried no weight. She'd spent years perfecting that performance, the fragile act. But this time, no one clapped. My mother's face was streaked with disappointment. My father's shoulders slumped as though something sacred had shattered. Mr. Stein's tone softened, but only slightly. You understand, Miss Tiffany, that your actions constitute criminal fraud. The court will decide the final penalty, but the sale will be rescinded immediately. The funds and assets purchased with them will be frozen. Wait, please, she choked out. You can't do this. I'll lose everything. He looked at her evenly. You already did. Tiffany turned to me then, desperation twisting her features. You can fix this, she pleaded. Tell them you forgive me. We can just undo it quietly. I held her gaze, remembering every moment I'd mistaken her manipulation for love, every time I'd accepted crumbs and called it family. Then I said gently but firmly, I did forgive you, Tiffany. But that doesn't erase what you did. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked around the table for sympathy, finding none. The weight of her own arrogance settled heavy on her shoulders. Mr. Stein gathered the papers, his job nearly done. You'll be contacted soon regarding formal proceedings, he said, standing. I suggest you secure legal counsel. Tiffany sank into her chair, staring blankly at the tablecloth, the one Grandma had embroidered by hand. For a fleeting moment, I saw the child she'd once been, jealous, desperate for control, terrified of being less. But the pity I might have felt once was gone now. As Mr. Stein left, my parents followed him out, too stunned to speak. I stayed seated across from her. The candlelight flickered between us, shadows stretching across her face. You made one crucial mistake, I said softly. You thought I'd always stay silent. She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. You were supposed to love me. I did, I said. But love isn't blindness, and Grandma taught me the difference. The final candle went out then, as if the night itself was drawing a curtain on what was left of her lies. Justice didn't roar that night. It landed quietly, with the weight of truth and the sound of one sister's undoing. The days after the dinner moved in strange, echoing quiet, like the calm that comes after a thunderstorm, when the air still hums with leftover electricity. News of Tiffany's actions spread faster than I could have imagined. My parents tried to keep it private, but word slipped through family circles, neighbors, even old friends. The story of the perfect daughter who forged her sister's signature had a life of its own now, whispered with pity, disbelief, and just a touch of poetic justice. The luxury car Tiffany had paraded around town disappeared from her driveway one gray morning. I watched from my car parked across the street, the tow truck's flashing lights painting streaks across her windows. The engine's groan as it rolled away felt like punctuation, one final, heavy period at the end of her performance. By the end of the week, her accounts were frozen, her friends gone silent. The designer bag she once flaunted online vanished from her feed. She stopped posting altogether. Mom called once, voice trembling, caught between anger and heartbreak. I don't know what to say to her, she whispered. She's still my daughter, but I can't recognize her anymore. I understood. Tiffany had built her life like a stage set, beautiful from the front, hollow behind. When the lights went out, all that was left were the broken props. A week later, Mr. Stein called. "It's official," he said. "The condo is back under your name. The court nullified the sale." I thanked him quietly, though the words barely reached the weight in my chest. I should have felt triumph, but what I felt was something deeper, a tired, quiet sort of peace. When I unlocked the condo door again, the scent of old salt air hit me like memory. The space was emptier than I remembered, stripped bare by the buyers who'd moved in for a few short weeks. But in that emptiness, there was something sacred, an invitation to begin again. I walked through the room slowly, my footsteps echoing softly. The kitchen still had the faint outline where Grandma's spice rack used to hang. I touched the wall, remembering her humming while she cooked, her laughter spilling over the sound of boiling water. The living room window, the one facing the ocean, caught the afternoon light just right, the same way it used to when she'd sit by it, knitting and watching the tide roll in. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined her there again, that gentle smile tugging at her lips. "You did good, sweetheart," she would have said. "You learned when to fight and when to let go." I didn't cry. I just breathed. Standing there, I realized justice wasn't loud. It wasn't the kind of victory that came with applause or revenge anthems. It was quiet, patient, like the ocean reclaiming the sand after every wave. I placed a small framed photo of Grandma on the mantel, the one where she was laughing in her garden hat. "It's ours again," I whispered, "and I'll take care of it this time, just like you took care of me." Outside, the wind picked up, a soft, coastal breeze that carried the scent of salt and eucalyptus. It wrapped around me like a blessing. Tiffany didn't reach out again, not directly. I heard through Mom that she was staying with a friend in another city, trying to get back on her feet. Maybe she'd find her way someday. Maybe she wouldn't. But her choices weren't my burden anymore. For years I had mistaken silence for peace, believed that keeping things smooth meant keeping them whole. But Grandma had been right all along. Sometimes peace comes only after the storm tears everything false apart. As the sun sank beyond the horizon, light poured through the windows, turning the walls gold. I sat on the floor with a cup of tea and let the sound of the waves fill the space. It was the same ocean Grandma loved, the same view she'd fought so hard to keep. And for the first time, I understood what she'd meant when she said this condo wasn't just a home. It was a reminder that love doesn't need witnesses, and justice doesn't need noise. Somewhere far away, Tiffany's world was falling apart. Mine, at last, was standing still, quiet, grounded, and finally free. Evening settled softly over the ocean, the light thinning into gold before slipping into blue. I sat by the same window where Grandma used to rest her teacup, the one that caught every sunset like it was made just for her. The condo was quiet now, no hum of voices, no echoes of tension. Just the sound of waves meeting the shore, steady and eternal, the way she always described life. Rough in motion, calm in rhythm. In my lap was her old leather-bound journal, the one I'd found tucked away in a drawer while unpacking. It smelled faintly of lavender and ink, Grandma in scent and spirit. I flipped through the worn pages, her looping handwriting trailing like memory itself. She had written about small joys, the bloom of her hibiscus plant, her favorite pie recipe, the day she taught me to whistle, and I nearly fainted from laughing too hard. Then, near the middle, a passage caught my eye, the ink darker, as if she'd pressed harder into the paper that day. She had underlined it twice. Money reveals character. Loss reveals truth. I traced the words with my finger, my throat tightening. That was Grandma, soft-spoken but never vague. I could almost hear her voice in those words. Calm and certain. People's real selves come out when they think something's theirs to lose. Tiffany's face flickered across my mind. Her gleaming smile, the tilt of her chin when she thought she was untouchable, and then the quiet collapse when the truth came. For a long time, I used to envy her. Her ease in rooms, her confidence. the way people gravitated toward her. I thought she had it all figured out. Now, I realized, she'd been running on fear all along, fear of not being enough. And maybe that was the truth Grandma wanted me to see. That inheritance wasn't about property or money. It was about learning who you are when people betray you, and when you have the power to betray back, but choose not to. The journal lay open in my lap, and I noticed another line scribbled in the margin beside the quote, "If she learns this, I'll know she's ready." I didn't need to wonder who she meant. I looked out at the sea again. The waves glowed with the last light of the sun, each one dissolving gently into the next. It reminded me that healing wasn't a single moment. It was a tide, retreating, returning, reshaping what it touched. Tiffany's chapter in my story wasn't a wound anymore. It was a scar, visible, yes, but no longer sore. She'd taught me something Grandma never could have with words alone, that forgiveness doesn't mean absence of justice. It means reclaiming peace after you've earned it. The condo, once a symbol of loss, now felt alive again. I'd painted the walls soft white, replaced the curtains, even set Grandma's teacup by the window like an offering. When the light hit it just right, it shimmered like something still waiting to be loved. I closed the journal, holding it against my chest. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. Not to Tiffany, not to my parents, not even to myself. I had already done what Grandma wanted most. I'd learned how to stand without bitterness. Outside, the moon rose quietly, its reflection trembling across the water. I whispered into the stillness. "You were right, Grandma. I finally understand. The condo didn't feel empty anymore. It felt honest, like a mirror that finally showed my own strength back to me. Justice had given me closure. But her lesson gave me peace.